Hi, everybody. I'm Lida Tohidi. By means of a quick intro, I run a consultancy in San Francisco, so not too far from here. And I also teach marketing and meditation part-time, different classrooms, of course. And I'm joined by the lovely Jackie Copeland-Carson here. We just met not too long ago. And I looked up her LinkedIn, and she is very, very experienced, and she's such an expert in the space, so I'm really excited to be speaking with her. Just a few highlights. So you already heard that she has a PhD, so she knows what she's talking about. She also has 2 master's degrees. So yes, she's definitely the expert that we want to talk to. She has been a social impact executive, both for public and private sector companies, and she recently joined Anita B. And I had the honor of speaking at one of their events in San Francisco last year. So you definitely have heard of Anita B. Has anyone heard of the Grace Hopper Conference by show of hands? Okay, that's most of this full room, which is awesome. So and if you haven't heard of it, it's the world's preeminent women in tech gathering that happens every year. And there's, 30,000 women, something like that?
We're getting there. Last year, 21,000. This year, we expect 25,000.
Nice. So I'm just forecasting the following year. Great. So with that, without any further ado, I'll let you know how I'll structure this conversation. I want to lead this with the challenges. So we'll get that bad stuff out of the way and quickly move on to the solutions. And I want to invite all of the audience to definitely put your questions in. This is very few chances that we get to ask questions of the keynote speakers, so definitely make sure you ask your questions, and I'll leave some time for that. So with that out of the way, so Jackie, what are some of the challenges that you see in getting more underrepresented voices in the tech community?
Well, first, I want to say hi to everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you and have this important conversation. And thanks for inviting me. I want to recognize I have a couple of colleagues in the audience. If you work with Anita B., raise your hands. They make the magic work. I love them. So I think that some of the key issues facing the field, and this is like one of the most innovative fields that has existed in human history. But ironically, one of the greatest challenges and most persistent challenges is just including the diversity of humanity in the field. And that is what diversity is in the final analysis, is really ensuring that all of the talent that exists on the planet has a fair shot at contributing to the tech field. And I always say that tech is not just a career anymore, that in a 21st century digital economy, it's a basic human right. And so I really think about that, and we all have our different backgrounds in tech, but everything we do every day is making an entirely new world. And so if we have half of humanity, when you look at women or certain ethnic and other minorities, not having an on-ramp to even be at the table, that is a serious problem. That means that we are creating a future that will continue to exclude key people from all of the walks, all of the spheres of life now that are being heavily dominated by technology, which includes everything from healthcare, education. I mean, how many of us have elderly parents or grandparents who need services and they can only get them through the internet and have no idea how to use it? So it's just it's such a fundamental basic right now. It's kind of moved beyond careerism to be a real social justice issue.
I can't say anything to add to that. That's amazing. And I think one thing, just for the audience to know, and I think this is a great quote, as we're talking about diversity and inclusion, I heard this great quote recently, which is, diversity is being asked to go to the party, and inclusion is being asked to dance. So it's not just enough to get, elderly people into the tech space or any other aspect of humanity that is an underrepresented voice. They cannot be the token minority in any way. We definitely need to include them. So with that, have you seen any great success stories or solutions in this space for underrepresented people in tech?
I do think that there are a lot of success stories, and because I'm trained as a cultural anthropologist, I'm always scanning solutions across the world because I don't necessarily assume that the best solutions only come from the US. They really come from humanity.
Yeah.
One of the most compelling approaches that I recently experienced was really at our Grace Hopper event in India last year. And I learned there that India is the first country in the world to achieve 50-50 parity in entry-level hiring for men and women. And for me, that was totally amazing. If I had asked most of you in the country, in this room, which country you thought had achieved that, would you have guessed India? No. Okay. And so I learned a lot about how that happened. And there are challenges because women are not staying in technology due largely to, I'll just say, social and cultural pressures that say that once you get married and once you have children, you need to kind of free up that space for men. And if you're a good wife and a good mother, you will be home full time with your kids. But leaving that aside, I mean, India is still a poor country despite all of the innovation and talent. And as I probed to learn more about what created this miracle to me, one of the key lessons is that there is compulsory education for 10 years, and boys and girls get an absolute equal shot at STEM education in elementary school and the beginning years of high school. There's not that pressure at middle school that many of our girls experience. It was like, if you want to be attractive to boys or you want to be really popular to boys, you better not be a science or math geek. That simply does not exist. And so it's really interesting to see what leveling of the playing field can happen if boys and girls have equal opportunities to tech or STEM education from the earliest years of education. And so that has happened in India. I do encourage all of you, and many of you work for multinational companies, to look for solutions in those companies as well, because I think that this persistent challenge of diversity, equity, and inclusion will be solved by through innovations that mix and match the experiences of different countries, because we have all the diversity of the world in the US, right? And so that's an area that we're trying to do some think tanking and knowledge building around at anitab.org so that we can share solutions from around the world with our corporate partners.
That's great to hear. And you mentioned that women in STEM tend to leave the field earlier in India, and I can tell you that I've seen statistics,
Yes.
and it's women leave at twice the rate of men, even in the US, and
Yeah.
women of color is at 3+ times the rate. So it's also an issue here, so we should definitely think about that.
I think in the US, the studies also indicate that, if I may use the term, let's just say cultures that are not necessarily receptive to women once they get there, are also a driver. These are best in class, educated, brilliant women who have choices as well. They're not necessarily going home, they're going to your competitor company that might have a more inclusive culture that fosters a sense of real belonging. And so for me, retaining women in other represented groups is not just, it's not a political or moral imperative, it is a business imperative. We all want the best talent. That is the secret sauce to any successful business. And so it is in the best interest of the corporate technology field to find a way to help women remain in their careers. In fact, we have I don't know how much you want me to get into our strategy, but let's just say that one of the personas, market segments that we're focusing on over the next 5 to 6 years is mid-career women. Their experience is one of kind of 3 steps forward and 2 steps backwards because of the very high turnover rate across the field with mid-career women who find themselves bumping up against glass ceilings, glass boxes, and there are some innovations across the world that could help with that I believe corporate technology should utilize more fully.
Definitely. And I actually advise a Women in Tech mentorship program called WEST. And WEST actually stands for Women Entering and Staying in Tech. And our emphasis is on the staying in tech part because retention is also an issue. So if that's of interest to anyone in the room, feel free to check it out. And I know a lot of people in the room are either entrepreneurs or at very early stage startups. So I want to continue the solutions aspect of our conversation by asking you a piece of advice that you would have for someone to already start their team to be diverse and inclusive.
I think it's human nature to start with what you know, right? You have an important project, you're starting an organization, so you look to friends you trust, maybe former classmates, mentors, to maximize or sort of accelerate the kind of synergy and teamwork that especially needs to happen on the front end of a new enterprise. One of the most powerful things you can do is to take a moment and reach beyond your ready-made network. Get engaged in organizations like this one, like AnitaB.org. One of the wonderful things that's happened in the past 5 to 10 years in the technology field is that there are all of these culturally specific technology groups. Get involved with them, sponsor an event, become a member, become an ally. And you, just like you build networks and trusting relationships with those networks that come to you naturally, you will find a ready-made audience of amazing talent that will help propel your business and bring new ideas that might not be on your radar screen, particularly since, especially today, as you grow, you will become at least a partially global business. And so having that built-in cultural competence and even the ability to learn new cultural markets quickly, because none of us can master all of the details of all of the diversity on the planet. It's impossible. But there is a particular sort of IQ, sort of a cultural, it's almost like a cross-cultural learning capacity that you need to think about cultivating into your business, how to learn about diversity, how to learn about different, even technological histories and practices and approaches. My primary focus areas as an anthropologist are Africa and South Asia. And when you study, for example, Indian history and culture, you learn a wholly different mindset about technology that's connected to cosmology that I've personally found very enriching in my work as a technologist and a social inclusion activist. And so it is really important to get behind the numbers and get to know communities, histories, cultures, different world views, because that is a resource for innovation.
I love it. I've lived and worked all over the world, but I definitely agree with you that even that is just scratching the surface. So do your best to keep on educating yourself about this topic and about this field. And as I promised, I'm going to get to questions. So we have a few minutes left, actually 5 minutes exactly, to address some of the top questions. So Jackie, the first one is, what do you think the role live streaming has had in the expansion of women's voices?
Well, I think video in general, whether it's live streamed or on YouTube, has been a real game changer as part of kind of the expressive culture, even as an organizing and marketing tool in the digital age. I think that live streaming gives women and other communities an opportunity to sort of instantaneously organize, spread new ideas, create at least temporary community, to create common cause across diversity. And it also, of course, you can record the live stream and continue to share it. So I think the increasing accessibility of live streaming helps to build broader communities and enables women and others in the women in general in the women's rights movement, but other social justice movements, to organize more quickly across different places at a very low cost to entry that doesn't require hiring professionals. And so it enables more kind of do-it-yourself organizing that we see all kinds of social activist groups using throughout the world. And one of the uses, and I'm not trying to give a plug for anyone, but we've all witnessed the use of Facebook for this purpose in a way that was not anticipated, to document social justice abuses and share them across the world instantaneously. I think it's certainly changed the contemporary civil rights movement and the women's rights movement to kind of record injustices in real time, not even record, stream injustices in real time and share them across the world to make common cause.
That's great. So we have 2 questions tied for second, so I'll try to take both of them. Oh, it changed. Okay. I observed that more women are active in tech or entrepreneurship in Asia than in the West. And how come? I don't know if these stats are real, but 60-40, 80-20.
Well, that's an interesting question, and there's a lot of debate about it, and some of the theories I don't agree with, but I will just share some I've heard, and then I'll tell you what I think. And I'm going to use the example of India because that's the Asian country that I know a little bit more. So first, there is the more equalized educational access to STEM. I think running from elementary school to high school, and even active encouragement of women to enter STEM fields. Technology, I am told technology companies in India often offer safe spaces for women living in communities faced with very severe and daunting patriarchy. Okay? And so you will hear Indian families who have told me, well, I feel like my daughter is safe working inside of a tech company. I've heard things like the tech companies are air conditioned and it gets really hot in India and everybody wants to work there, so you work hard. So how many people from India in the audience? I'm going to do a quick poll because I don't half believe that one. And so is it true? I've had so many people tell me this, that part of the attraction to tech is the air conditioning in India. Raise your hands if you've heard that at least. Or if people, you have. I always wonder if people are really pulling my leg. And so I have been told that one. I do believe that in some ways, having read many of the ancient texts, understanding a little bit more about the culture than the average American, that there is perhaps a comfort level with some of the underlying concepts of technology that children are exposed to from very early ages. So I think those are some of the factors to think about, which really also emphasizes the importance of learning cultures from the inside out instead of just counting the numbers to promote diversity.
Definitely. And with that, we're out of time. Thank you all for being here, all those on live stream.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.